Hello. In this video I will show you how to remove bearings from the front fork. Now you need to remove the front fork completely to be able to replace the bearings. And to do that you need to remove this part, and after that you just remove some of these parts. I don't know how they are lined up. I just put them here on the table so that you can see how many parts there are. You remove them piece by piece until you come to this part here. Now this part is also a nut. It is a special nut, and on the lower part of this nut is one part of the bearing. So this is one piece of the bearing. The bearings, this is the bearing. It's from two pieces, and in the middle are still marbles. So when you remove this part, you will be able to remove the front fork. So after you remove front fork, you will have this part inside of the frame. So this is one part of the bearing, the upper part, and on the lower part is the second one. Now to remove this part of the bearing is very easy. You have hole one here, and the second hole is here. So you need to have tool like this or anything that can go inside of this hole, and by hitting with hammer the bearing will fall out. Same thing is in upper part. You have this hole here, and also the second hole is here. So after you remove these parts, you can clean it and put new parts, new bearings inside, and you have finished this part of the job. Now to remove this part, so this part here, you also have these two holes, but you will need to have some sort of the pipe or something like that, so that the inside diameter of the pipe is for this bearing, so that this bearing will go inside the pipe, and this part here will stay on that pipe. So when you remove this part, it will fall inside that pipe or something that can you use as a tool. So after removing this part, I usually heat this part of the bearing to 120 degrees, and you install it inside, and you check how the bearing is seated. So is it sit nicely, or there is maybe some gap between this bearing and this nut. Now there is only one piece left, and that is the second part of the bearing at the lower part of the front fork, so this part here, and it is also quite easily to remove. Now from this part, from the bottom, you have one hole and the second hole, so you will need to have some sort of the rod or something like that, 5 mm in diameter, and about, I don't know, some 200 mm long. So you put it inside the hole, and hitting with hammer you will remove the bearing, and you repeat the same thing as in previous bearing, you hit that part to 110, maybe 120 degrees, and lower it inside. And if everything is clean, the bearing should fall down at the bottom, and that would be okay. But you will also need to check after the bearing is cooled. You will need to try to see, is it sitting okay, is there any maybe visible gaps between the front fork and the bearing. So you can, before removing this part, you can measure the distance from the bearing to this upper part and see will this, after you put a new bearing, you can check are the distance the same. So if there is a difference in distance, so that means that this new bearing is not sitting well. So that is the easiest way to be certain that the bearing is installed okay. Now it's time to put steel marbles into this part of the bearing. Now you need to put some grease on the bearing and you can put marbles. This grease will hold marbles in place so that they will not fall from inside of the bearing. And this part is finished. You do the same thing on the lower part of the frame, and the grease will hold marbles from falling out. And after that you install the front fork. You only need to be careful to not hitting too much or making any vibration. You need to install it very nicely and carefully to avoid these marbles from falling. They will stick to this part, but if you make some vibration or something like that, they can fall out. And after installing the front fork, you proceed with installing that special nut that has the second part of the bearing. And that's it. After that you just install all other parts that goes on the upper part of the front fork.